Chapter 25. Sig and Victor laughed as they walked along the coast. Though the air was cold and the moisture in the air seemed to carry it into their clothing, they were feeling much better. The unexpected attack by fire demon worshippers that had sunk their ship had created some problems, but it seemed to them that these problems were mostly solved. With Jennifer, Victor, and Row 82 being rescued from Angelica's tournament, and the success of Lucas, Kirana, and Lizard in freeing Jonathan, the triumph of Divine Key Guardians over the Syndicate appeared to be imminent. "I still can't believe you got that raft inflated," said Victor. "Yeah, that foot pump was hard to use in the water," laughed Sig. "It ended up working, though." "But the fire demon acolytes," said Victor. "They just let you do it?" "They thought they had killed everyone when the boat went down," said Sig, "and the fire out on the water made it hard to see when we came ashore." "I would have loved to have seen their faces when you used the Heaven's Shield," said Victor with a smile. Sig laughed loudly. "That was definitely the best," agreed Sig. "Well, until they started running." "Yeah, it would have been great if Lizard hadn't gotten knocked out," agreed Victor. "But it looks like everyone is okay now," said Sig with a smile. "We don't know that," said Kirana in a low voice. "Relax," said Sig with a smile. "Row 82 would have told us if something was off." "Really?" asked Kirana in annoyance. They turned and looked at Row 82, who was about 50 yards behind them, desperately rubbing the metal plates behind his head to remove the moisture and warm them up. His face was contorted in discomfort. He stumbled as he tried to keep up with the others. Between the weight of his pack and the stiffness of his joints in the cold, he was miserable. "Does he look like he's going to be able to sense anything but rust forming on his implants?" asked Kirana. Sig scratched the back of his head and laughed. "Maybe not," he admitted. "Are you doing all right?" asked Victor as Row 82 caught up to them. "I've been in the cold with Epsilon 41, but this is unpleasant," said Row 82 between chattering teeth. "Was I talking too loudly?" asked Sig. Row 82 gave him a look of confusion. "No, Sig," said Victor. "I think he's talking about the moisture in the air making it colder." "Oh, right," said Sig with a smile. "Do you know how far away Jonathan and Lizard are?" asked Kirana. "No, I haven't checked in some time," admitted Row 82. He grabbed his key and his eyes lit up. He gasped immediately. "Sig, get your shield up," shouted Row 82. Sig grabbed his key and squeezed it tightly. His eyes lit up and a golden sphere surrounded the four of them. No sooner had the shield appeared than a pair of black-cloaked acolytes slammed against it. The force of the sudden stop killed them instantly. "Speed demon worshippers," said Sig in a low voice. "The Heaven's Shield Bearer," came a voice behind them. They turned around. "Leslie Fisher," said Row 82 as he shivered in the cold. "You were so enthusiastic about the Syndicate's survival of the fittest philosophy, Row 82, said Leslie as she approached the golden shield. "I still am," said Row 82. Kirana, Sig, and Victor turned toward Row 82 in disappointment simultaneously. "Your colleagues seem less invested in the concept," observed Leslie. A condescending smirk appeared on her face as she looked at the frowns on the faces of the others. "Perhaps," said Row 82, "but they are more fit than you." The smirk on Leslie's face disappeared and was quickly replaced by an expression of anger. "Don't pretend to be superior," said Leslie in anger. "Your escape was not of your own making." Row 82 laughed. "So you're excusing your failure to stop it by saying I had help?" laughed the augment. "Take responsibility for yourself." "Oh, I am," said Leslie with a smile. "I am going to kill all of you." "You can't penetrate the shield," said Sig confidently, "and we are not in a rush." "Perhaps you believe that the two who were nearby will come to your aid?" guessed Leslie with a sadistic grin. Her tone caused Kirana to pull the chain holding her divine key off of her neck and hold it tightly. "Struck a nerve, have I?" laughed Leslie. "Where are they?" asked Kirana in a low voice. "Don't let her bait you," whispered Victor. Leslie looked up in the air and pressed her finger to her chin as though she were trying to recall something. "How does Jason say it?" asked Leslie. She turned and smiled. "Oh yes, they are under new management." "Jason Torres," whispered Victor. "He's the new William Fine." "And if I understand," continued Leslie, "he was not happy about being under suspicion when the tournament was disrupted. He's eager to prove to Angelica, and more to the Death Witch, that he is devoted to the Syndicate." "What does that mean?" thundered Kirana. Her key flared up and morphed into a large flaming sword. Leslie jumped with a start, but then smiled. "Oh," she said with a smile. "Heaven's sword, heaven's shield, and I already know about Victor's heaven's breath. The big three are here." "You're outmatched," said Row 82 confidently. "Hardly," laughed Leslie. "As soon as you open the shield, you're dead." "And how do you intend to lower the shield?" asked Row 82. "I'm sure I can find something to persuade you," said Leslie. She rushed away. A minute later she appeared with a white cloak in her hand. "Jonathan," whispered Victor with worry. Kirana's sword burst into flames and her eyes glowed brightly. "Open the shield, Sig," she said in a low voice. "She's baiting you," said Row 82. "I know," said Kirana. "How will you counter her speed?" asked Victor, who hoped to be the voice of reason. She turned and looked at Victor slowly. Her dark, straight hair tossed about as the heat from her sword caused the air around her to rise. Her eyes glowed with a blinding white light. "I'm going to kill her," said Kirana. Her voice was calm and resolute. It caused the others to back away from her nervously. "Get ready to heal, Victor," said Sig with a smile. "Sig," said Row 82 nervously. Victor grabbed his key, knowing that continued conversation was pointless. "Victor!" shouted Row 82. "In the end," said Victor as his eyes began glowing, "you have to trust your friends." Row 82's mouth hung open. He had trusted the others, but before, they had acted mostly rationally. Even when Stephanie had assumed that he was the traitor in their midst, he had understood her reasoning. As the golden shield that surrounded them dissipated, all of the frustration he had felt with the divine keybearers came back to the surface. He clenched his fists and furrowed his brow. His new friends had exposed him, and he wanted to survive. There was a quick blur of darkness that seemed to fly toward them. Row 82 knew it was Leslie Fisher. The sting of metal slicing across their arms was nearly unbearable, but the augment could think of nothing to stop it. The implants in his throat expanded, and he let out an angry shriek. His cry was cut short by a dagger piercing his throat. "Not this time," laughed Leslie. Row 82 coughed and choked. He fell to his knees and squeezed the wound on his neck. He slumped down in despair. All of his efforts to survive had been rendered pointless. He reflected back on his accomplishments. Certainly he had helped to take down the destroyer, but these would not be the deeds that were remembered by humanity in the coming years. It would be those of Daniel Young, whose wake of ruin not only slaughtered millions, but condemned humanity to a nightmarish life near the narrow band of habitable earth that remained. For a moment, Row 82 envied Daniel Young. Though he had died, his legacy remained. With his focus on the destroyer, he was barely aware of anything around him when an excruciating pain surged through his neck. He opened his eyes to see Victor next to him. As the pain diminished, he became aware of Victor's voice. "Stay with us," shouted Victor. Row 82 thought it was odd that Victor should seem so eager to help him after not helping him persuade Sig to keep the shield up. "Why?" whispered Row 82 at last. "What would my absence do to hurt you?" "Shut up," shouted Victor angrily. "If you hold the perception key, you shouldn't have to ask that." Row 82 looked down at his mirrored key. The shining light seemed to call to him, and he was reminded of the moment when Lucas Flynn first gave it to him and changed his life. He tried to fight against the calling of his divine key, but eventually he had come to realize that the power that had been given to him was not a curse. In spite of everything he had done, he had been chosen. He turned back to Victor, who was desperately trying to heal both himself and Kirana. Row 82 raised an eyebrow in confusion. Of course he understood why he would try to heal Kirana and Sig, but he had no idea why a man who had personally lost so much to augments would invest any real energy in saving him. It had surprised him in Angelica Sterling's tournament, and it surprised him here. Row 82 grabbed his key, and his eyes began to glow. The sting of metal slicing his face seemed to dull as the power of his key activated. Though Leslie Fisher was still running far too quickly for Row 82 to counterattack, an aspect of her strategy suddenly became apparent. She was only staying near the key bearers for very short periods of time. At first, Row 82 had assumed it was because of her momentum that she was going back and forth so far, but he realized that she had another motivation: fear. Row 82 noticed the lengths to which she went to avoid getting close to Kirana's burning blade. Undoubtedly, similar fears had allowed Angelica to keep Leslie in check. She disliked fire. "Put the shield back up, Sig," shouted Row 82. "Hang in there, Row 82, replied Sig. "No, I have a plan," replied Row 82. Sig turned and looked at the augment and decided that he was sincere. He threw up the shield. "This better be good," whispered Kirana as her blade grew brighter. Victor took a moment to heal the others. Leslie laughed outside the golden dome. "I thought I was outmatched," taunted the Demon Master. Row 82 whispered in Sig's ear. He began smiling widely. "You are," said Victor. Part of him wanted to show faith in his friends. Part of him wanted to inspire patience in Kirana, whose eyes and sword had grown brighter. And part of him just wanted the short woman in the black cloak that had been slicing and stabbing them to shut her mouth. "Ready for another go, Victor?" asked Row 82. Victor's eyes glowed as he nodded. The shield went down again. This time Leslie went straight for Victor and jammed her knife into his gut. "You can't keep healing forever," chided Leslie as she twisted the blade. Victor groaned in pain as his flesh wove around the blade, healing the damage as fast as it was being inflicted. Kirana leapt toward her, and she darted away. Row 82 reached into his pack and pulled out a can of lighter fluid. He squirted the fluid toward her as she rushed back and cut Sig. Sig surrounded himself with a golden sphere and rushed toward Leslie, but she rushed back. "Do you think that's actually going to work?" laughed Leslie as she avoided a stream of lighter fluid that Row 82 squirted in her general direction. "You can't hit me." Row 82 seemed unconcerned and continued squirting large amounts of fluid toward her. Ignoring the stream of flammable liquid that she could easily avoid, she rushed by Kirana and slashed at her back, tearing her white coat. Kirana spun around with her flaming sword, but too late to hit the demon worshipper. Victor rushed and healed Sig and Kirana again, as Row 82 again attempted to squirt lighter fluid toward Leslie. She avoided it and slashed Row 82's stomach with her dagger. Row 82 shrieked in pain loudly, and Kirana leapt toward her again, but she ran out of range, laughing all the way. "That is seriously the stupidest thing I have ever seen," laughed Leslie. She ran toward Victor and stabbed him again. He groaned and healed himself as she rushed away from Kirana's attack. "I just don't think you're taking me seriously," shouted Leslie from behind them. "So let's see if this helps." She ran out of sight for a moment. "Get ready, Sig," said Row 82 as he held his can of lighter fluid. Sig smiled and nodded. "What is your plan?" demanded Kirana. "Just get back when I tell you," said Row 82. Kirana's blade exploded with fire. "Not yet," shouted Row 82. Wait till I grab her." She tilted her head in confusion, but before the augment could explain, Leslie Fisher appeared. "Maybe this will get you to take me seriously," she said as she tossed something at Kirana. Kirana jumped back and avoided it. The object landed softly on the cold ground. As Victor approached it, he noticed it was a small handkerchief wrapped around something. He unfolded it and gasped. "What is it?" asked Sig. "Nothing," said Victor as he gave Kirana a look of concern. "Show them," said Leslie from the other side of the group. "What is it?" demanded Kirana. "You don't want to know," said Victor as he folded it back up and put it in a pocket of his coat. "It's Jonathan's index finger," said Row 82 frankly. Kirana twisted around as Leslie burst out laughing. "Row 82!" shouted Victor angrily. Kirana rushed toward Leslie, but she avoided her easily. Leslie rushed up to Sig. He could see her coming and gripped his key. Leslie was surprised that no shield appeared, but stabbed him. Victor rushed up and healed him. Leslie turned and ran into a golden wall. The odd placement startled her, and she stumbled back. It was just enough time for Row 82 to jump on top of her. "Get off!" shrieked Leslie. Row 82 scrambled to point the can of lighter fluid toward her, but she slashed at his wrist, and his grip failed. The can tumbled and clanked on the rocky ground as Leslie struggled to get free of Row 82's other arm. "You failed," taunted Leslie as she broke free of the augment's grip and kicked him in the face. She pointed her dagger at him and smiled. "Hardly," whispered Row 82. Leslie lunged at Row 82 with incredible speed. Anticipating her movements perfectly, he whirled around and revealed he was holding the can of lighter fluid. The dagger punctured the can as Row 82 got to his feet and shook the can violently. Leslie's blade was stuck in the metal for a few moments, and before she could pry it free, both she and Row 82 were covered in the flammable liquid. No sooner had Leslie pulled her knife free than Kirana struck the ground with her flaming sword and created a circle of fire. The lighter fluid that Row 82 had squirted had created a circle around where they were, and Victor, Kirana, and Sig were outside the flaming ring. Leslie gasped and withdrew to the center. She breathed heavily and tried to calm the fear welling up inside her as she watched the flames dance around her. Finally, she turned to Row 82, who was slowly getting back to his feet. "You're trapped too," she said. Though she was trying to taunt, her voice wavered as she spoke. "I guess you're right," said Row 82 coldly as he tossed the empty can to the ground. "If only I knew someone that could make an impenetrable shield to protect me from the fire." Sig created a golden sphere around Row 82, and he walked through the flames without being harmed. "No!" shrieked Leslie. "You can't leave me here." "Throw your key out of the circle," said Kirana. Leslie looked down at her black key. She furrowed her brow in anger and looked back at Kirana. Leslie's black cloak fluttered in the cold wind as she tried to think of something to get back at the woman standing before her. Kirana's white cloak, dark hair, glowing eyes, and huge fiery blade made her look majestic. Leslie looked desperate, small, and pathetic in comparison. "You would take my power from me," shouted Leslie. Spittle flew from her lips. Her voice was shrill and frantic. She clenched her fist around her black key. "Your power?" said Kirana in disgust. "You stole that power by sacrificing human beings." "I have one more to sacrifice," retorted Leslie. Her eyes were wide, and her teeth were clenched. She clutched her dagger and rushed through the flames toward Kirana. Leslie Fisher moved with incredible speed. She tried not to focus on the flames that seemed to latch on to the hem of her black cloak, and pointed her dagger at the beautiful dark-haired woman with glowing eyes. Using her hatred to propel her, she flung her body forward with speeds that would have impressed Lizard. Of course, had she not been so consumed in her rage, she might have noticed Heaven's sword pointed right at her. Leslie shrieked in pain as the fiery sword pierced her heart and burned her from the inside. Kirana swung her sword, flinging the demon master's lifeless body to the ground, and then turned to the others. "Let's find Jonathan," said Victor after a moment of silence. "I know where he is," said Row 82 with glowing eyes. "Then it's good you came with us," said Victor as he patted Row 82 on the shoulder. Row 82 smiled for the first time in days.